all the Indo-European speaking people in the world, nearly all, except Greeks and Albanians, and Armenians, all of them descend, or the others, including everyone in India, Iran, and Europe, all descend from the corded ware culture. And the bell beaker is an offshoot of the corded ware culture.
Right.
And the corded ware is just called that because they use these cord marks on their pottery, ceramic drinking vessels that they bury their dead with. And then the bell beaker one is the same kind of vessel, but it's got more of a bell shape to it. It's not that different, and there's some overlap because corded ware and bell beaker have borders with each other. But there is other cultural differences. It seems like, although they're the same race, it does seem like there might be a religious difference between bell beaker and corded ware, but maybe not. That's speculative. But there are some archaeological traits that distinguish them. So maybe and there are different paternal lineages as well. So they're like two different clans of the same Indo-European race, if you will. And the western part of Europe gets dominated by bell beaker people. So all the Celtic peoples, all the Latin peoples, the Romans and the Iberians all descend from bell beaker. Right. And the Germanics descend from a mixture of bell beaker and corded ware, whereas Slavs and Balts descend just from corded ware. But anyway, the bell beaker people in Britain, they bring the first metallurgy, so they got metal daggers. They don't have swords yet, but they've got. They soon develop them later in the Bronze Age.
Golden trinkets occasionally.
Golden, pretty impressive belt buckles, huge. They wore these big rhombus-shaped piece of gold on their chest. It was extraordinary bling. Yeah,
look. That's such a step up from the people they're invading. Maybe not be exactly the right word, but the people that were already there must have thought, wow, these people are clearly more advanced. They're clearly more advanced.
I don't think they. I don't think it's true. It's not necessarily true that they were. They were in some respects. When they saw the gold and the metal tools and the fact that they had horses, although the bell beakers didn't depend on horses as much as their ancestors had on the steppe, they probably did think, wow, these people are impressive. But the only thing they built in terms of monuments, the biggest monument they built was their barrows, their round barrows, which are still all over the British landscape now. All around Stonehenge, you can see them. They built them around Stonehenge. But the last thing the indigenous farmers did before they were replaced completely is Silbury Hill. So Silbury Hill was built, it was finished off well after the bell beaker people had arrived. So when it was being started and finished, that entire period, there were bell beaker folk all around the countryside. But within it, there are no bell beaker shards at all, only grooved ware pottery. So we know that there was an indigenous building project, and it's the largest, I think it's the largest man-made mound in the world. It certainly was at the time. It's on a scale equivalent to the Grand Pyramid of Giza, and it's contemporary with it. It's an enormous and spectacular thing.
I'll put pictures up in post so people can see it. And it's right near us again in Wiltshire.
Yeah,
it's a remarkable thing, isn't it? It's almost like, are you sure men built that?
It looks like a mountain. Sure? It just looks like a mountain, but it's made by man. At the time, it wouldn't have looked like a mountain because it wouldn't have had grass. It had probably white clay or something over the top, so it looked more like a pyramid. But it was... There's no way the beaker folk could have made anything like that because they didn't have this kind of social organization where you have one inbred or very high elites, dynasties who control huge amounts of labor. They had, if you will, a much more localized form of power structures. So, for example, when we look at the Neolithic tombs, these chambered tombs, everyone inside is related. It's just dynasties mostly, closely related. But when we find the elites of the bell beakers, we found a field of barrows, the people in the two neighbouring barrows have no blood relation at all. So they have a completely different system of power, which is probably to do with battle prowess and ability to assert yourself in acquiring land and goods, and not just the fact that your dad was the king or whatever. So they are the indigenous. The farmers were violent, no doubt about that. There is evidence of lots of violence among them. At Crickley Hill near Gloucestershire, for example, a massacre. They were slaughtering each other regularly. But the violence that the bell beaker people brought in was a different kind of violence. And obviously, it was an expansionist violence. They had definitely a culture of acquiring land and expanding, because the Indo-Europeans expand all across Eurasia very quickly. And their mobile pastoralist lifestyle assists that. But they just could not make anything on that scale. The biggest thing that Indo-European made was burial mound, which is much smaller
And
than
the big
anything.
Sarsens at Stonehenge, they're
That's
responsible for that.
yeah. Well,
aren't
what
they?
they do is move them around. So I think that they didn't bring those there. They were brought there, and what the Bell Beakers did is move them around according to their religious views. So the Stonehenge, the original orientation, is something to do with, I think it's sunrise at winter and sunset in midsummer, whereas the horseshoe-shaped Sarsen stones at Stonehenge are aligned to sunset at midwinter, which is obviously what the
180.
the Bell Beaker
Completely
is a different angle
Completely
thing.
different.
The rest of the monuments oriented to a different solar event. So they both have like a religion concerned with the sun, the path of the sun, but the Bell Beakers one is different, and it's more concerned with the sun. It's either sunset or sunrise at midwinter. So they just moved the stones around. It's not the same scale of building, and also they're carving images all over those stones of their axes. So you can see on the Sarsen stones at Stonehenge, there's this like graffiti, if you will, of all these axes, hundreds of axes. I can't remember how many axes are carved on them, but that's them, because the people before didn't have those. They had to build this whole thing with just antlers and bits of wood. They didn't have any metal.
It is remarkable at Stonehenge how many different layers. It's not just one thing. It was built
hundreds
over
of years,
over
yeah.
hundreds or even a couple of thousand years, and there's different cultures, maybe even different religions are involved in it, and they
Definitely.
just keep repurposing it.
Definitely.
Over and over again. One last
Still
thing
happening
quickly.
now, right? With the
yeah.
hippies going
Right,
having
we
raves and taking acid. It's
we
a new
keep-
religion there.
Keep repurposing it.
Yeah.
But quickly, very quickly, on Silbury Hill, we don't think there's anything buried under it. There doesn't seem to
It's
be a
not
big
a burial
chamber.
mound. It's
There's
not
no
a-
chamber at
no.
the bottom of it or anything.
No.
That's
Well, I don't know
it's
what
very
it is.
enigmatic,
Sometimes
isn't it? It's very enigmatic. What
This is me
that?
speculating. I think that they saw that the new incomers, the Bell Beaker, had this tradition of making burial mounds, and they were like, "Well, if that's what you do, we'll show you how we can do
right,
it." And they
right.
made the biggest mound that's
Right.
ever been made, just to say,
That
like,
makes sense.
we
That
can do
makes
it.
some
We're
sense.
better than you. Because you say they're more advanced, the incomers, but they could not have done Silbury Hill. The newcomers couldn't have done that. So they were more advanced at killing and expanding, but they weren't more advanced at monument building. And as a result, we are the Bell Beaker people, and the other people have only left the hill.
Right.
So
right.
what's more useful in the long time is not big buildings. It's the ability to because what I was getting at is that 90% population replacement, and today we descend largely from Bell Beaker folk, although not entirely from the initial Bell Beaker migration then, because we've had subsequent migrations of other peoples from the continent who also descend from Bell Beaker folk.
Right.
So
right. It's a complicated map.
Very complicated, yeah.
Right.
So the other two major migrations that contributed to us are the Celts and the Anglo-Saxons.
Okay. Just before we move on to those, I wanted to pick your brain briefly talk about the Amesbury Archer, because I think he represents one of those first early Bell Beaker waves.
Yeah, he does.
But yet his grave, whether there was originally something built over it, whether there was any sort of dolmen or any sort of hill
barrow,
or mound, we don't know. But certainly he was found in just a sort of flat bit of ground, and he was found with sort of a perfect example of a Bell Beaker, and lots and lots of arrowheads, and all sorts of other things, a couple of very small golden trinkets. I'll put pictures up in post so people can see what he was found with. All sorts of different stuff. And like maybe they think he had a massive terrible abscess in his lower jaw, which would have been insanely painful. And he's buried right near Stonehenge. And so, yeah, just with the Amesbury Archer, is that sort of kind of is it right for me to think that he's sort of a perfect example of the earliest Bell Beaker?
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.